On this episode of Jets Uncovered, we're going to update the latest offseason moves for the New York Jets, including their huge trade this weekend, and what their remaining needs now are in free agency, and of course the draft with that third pick, what they should be, and maybe what they will be, as Jets Uncovered on the Our Lads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, it's Monday, March 19th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Welcome to another edition of Jets Uncovered on the Our Lads Football Radio Network at ourlads.com. And we promised you we would have several more shows, all depending on the activity of the Jets during this free agency process before the NFL draft, and we start preparing for our draft shows. And then, of course, Saturday, we heard the great news about the Jets acquiring the third pick in the draft. So here we are, ready to talk about it. Jan Levine, my partner, with me to talk about this big move for the New York Jets. And Jan, it's now down to a quarterback more than likely. I don't think that we should eliminate the possibility of something else. A Barkley or a Chubb if something crazy happens. But this is nothing but good.
First of all, you're good to speak to you again, Greg. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a very interesting piece of news I got. I obviously didn't see it, unfortunately, until after the Sabbath ended, but it was a little bit unexpected, mainly because the timing in which the deal occurred. I mean, you're looking at a good month plus before the draft itself, but clearly Mike McCagnon and the team brass had identified at least three players that they view as top players that they wanted that pick. They decided to be aggressive to prevent someone, let's say, from Buffalo trading up. If possible, still Cleveland trades down from one. But if you read some of the articles that I believe Mary Kay Cabot had written, I think Minnie Schmetta had written for the Daily News, the Jets had actually engaged on Cleveland originally and tried to get the number one pick and weren't able to necessarily find a match. You knew that the Giants necessarily right away weren't going to move down from two, although there was still that possibility that the Jets and Giants make a deal, the Jets doing so, or to try to make sure nobody can move up ahead of them, or the Giants doing so to extract a little more out of the Jets, especially thinking that the Jets won't pick the guy that the Giants clearly have in mind. In terms of what you've mentioned, I would assume that it's a quarterback. I would not necessarily be trading up necessarily maybe to get Barkley, even though everybody thinks he's a top quality running back. Mainly because the last time the Jets took a running back that high, it's the infamous Blair Thomas debacle that happened at number 2 that year.
That's okay.
For those Jet fans who remember that all too well, I don't think they'd move up to get Chubb, even though he clearly is the best defensive lineman in the draft. I don't think they're going to move up to get the offensive lineman either. So clearly it's going to be one of the three quarterbacks. And from word that I had gotten from talking to somebody who's gotten some information, not necessarily 100% confirmed, I think it's Allen, Rosen, and Darnold 1, 2, 3 with Mayfield fourth. You and I have a view in terms of our view on Mayfield in terms of what we think, and I would have been okay with them waiting to 6 and kind of seeing if Mayfield would slide down. But Mike McCagnon decided to be aggressive. If you go by the value chart, he clearly gave up a bit too much in terms of value. Let me phrase it. He gave up more value than would have been required associated with the pick. Value in terms of moving up from 6 to 3, giving up the 3 this year, their own second-round draft pick, the draft pick they got from Seattle for Sheldon Richardson, and also their number 2 pick next year. And also if you compare it to the last time a team moved up from lower in the draft to 3, I believe it was the Deion Jordan trade where the team moved up from 12 and gave up 12 to go up from 12 to 3. They gave up their 42nd pick overall. So they definitely paid more than would be required, but as indicated by a lot of other writers, that to move up in the draft when it's a quarterback late in draft and to get that potentially franchise guy, you are going to overpay. So personally, in my view, I like the aggressiveness of the trade. Granted, we won't know until how it pans out until we see who they take and how that player pans out. For me, though, I would have loved to see them being able to not have to give up 2 twos this year. I don't have an issue giving up the 2 next year, even though it may be a high pick because they kept their first rounder. But I would have preferred or liked if they would have been able to do the trade without giving up both 2s this year, given the other news that they have on this team.
Well, I've seen teams give up first-round draft picks for these types of moves, so I'm perfectly happy with it. I don't care about next year's second-round draft pick. They could recoup that. They've got a whole year and a half to do that. So basically, as far as I'm concerned, you trade a couple of second-round draft picks, you move up. Now, look, this all depends on who they're going to pick, too. I mean, who knows? I mean, if we sit there on draft day and they pick one of these quarterbacks that we're probably, well, maybe that was our fourth quarterback on our list or even our third quarterback on our list. And maybe we should have just stood at 6. So, yeah, there's that. As far as the quarterbacks, I'm telling you, I don't know if I could see Josh Rosen here. I just don't think that's going to work out. I think there's too much that could go wrong there, with his political views. I just don't think that makes any sense to do that. Why put that in a pressure cooker like New York and stir it? Especially a kid from UCLA. I don't think that's what they're doing. I would be surprised if that's what they're doing. I'm not saying Rosen can't be a good quarterback. I just don't think he fits with this organization. So I don't think the Jets move up to get him. I don't think Allen works out for this offense. The West Coast offense, you need a quarterback that usually these are guys that with high completion percentages that know how to throw the ball on target and timing. That's not Allen. So I don't see that. That's why I'm not still ruling out Baker Mayfield. Because let's put it this way. The reason I'm not going to rule out Baker Mayfield is this. More than likely, every GM believes that if you got 4 quarterbacks to choose from, you're going to like 1 or 2 of them. There's no way a GM's going to go, well, I'll take 3 or 4, which is the whole reason the Jets moved up, because they like 1 or 2 of them. There's no way that Mike Maccagnan moved up to this spot and saying to himself, well, we'll take the 3rd best quarterback. I'm okay with that. And by the way, I don't think the Jets are going to move up to 2nd or 1st at this point anyway either, because they just don't have any more ammunition. And I don't think that would be going way too overboard, in my opinion, if they did that, unless there was a deal that makes sense. But I don't see them doing that. So I think it's down to Darnold and Mayfield myself. And I know there's a lot of rumors about Darnold going to Cleveland, and that could possibly happen. So I'm not ruling out Mayfield. The only reason that I even just mentioned Barkley as well is because Barkley is the best running back prospect to come out of the draft in a long time. And that's the type of player that if you can get, I don't look at it as a worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. I can't imagine that's going to happen, because I can't imagine, even though I think we could understand, hey, you're getting a great player. You can pick another quarterback like Loletta or White in the 3rd round. That's not going to, Jet fans aren't going to deal with that. They know they got to get themselves a 1st-round quarterback, a top guy. So it's going to be a quarterback. I do believe that. And you know what I think? I think they know Darnold's probably going to Cleveland. And I think they know Barkley's probably going to the Giants. I really think they know this, and that's part of the reason they made this move. I think they're pretty confident in what is more than likely going to happen. And that's the reason why they decided to make this move, because I think they really feel that, and they kind of know that now, because of that, who they're going to pick. And that's usually why you make these moves. And that's usually why we don't see these moves made until late in the draft process, because usually these guys want to know who they're going to get before they make these trades. I think the Jets are pretty confident that Darnold goes 1 and Barkley goes 2.
Yeah, I think that's the case as well. And then the question becomes, okay, who then is the guy you want? And you again, I think there's flaws with every player that we've mentioned. Part of it could be fit with Rosen. Part of it also has to be the health concerns, given the concussion history that he's had,
that's true
given
too.
some of the other injuries that he's had. So that has to clearly be a factor in there.
Yep.
What Allen gives you is the strong arm quarterback that every team seems to love. Granted, that comes with the counter argument that his accuracy is a major issue. And that's something that has to be remediated. But I think if they do go that route, the viewpoint has to be that the players that they have in place now in terms of the system, in terms of Jeremy Bates being here, will help him in that regard. His ability to sit behind Josh McCown and also maybe Teddy Bridgewater for a year will allow him not to necessarily be thrown into the fire immediately. I personally don't know if that's the direction I would go in, but I could see them going that direction. But granted, look, he clearly, Maccagnan has to have somebody in mind that he traded up to make sure that he could get, because he's afraid that somebody else is going to move up in front of him and get him. And that still could happen if either Cleveland moves down or the Giants move down.
Sure.
Neither one of which we don't know if that's going to happen right now. Personally, if I'm Cleveland, look, if they really want the guy they want, then they should probably just take him at 1 and then can move down at 4 if there's somebody else that's in a mix of players that they want. Same thing in terms of the Giants. If there's a guy they desperately want, and personally, I think Barkley for them makes just an inordinate amount of sense, only because it looks like they seem to be fairly sold on Davis Webb, and they also seem to be sold on Eli having a couple more years left. Whether that's right or that's wrong, that seems to be the direction they're willing to go in. So I think both teams could move down, but it wouldn't shock me if both teams stay with their picks and take the guys that you've selected in terms of Sam Darnold going to Cleveland and the Giants taking Barkley and the Jets then at 3 have a decision to make in terms of which quarterback do they truly believe is their future franchise quarterback.
And again, if it's me and the right quarterback isn't there, if a team trades with the Giants and they get a quarterback and 2 quarterbacks are taken and the Jets are not really they don't think that the third guy is their guy and they want to pick Barkley, I am all for it. I just don't know if they would do that, and I just don't, even though I think they should. That'll just show us whether or not they've got, the guts to move ahead with something like that in this market, settling once again for a 3rd rounder or a 4th round quarterback. And then, of course, banking on Teddy Bridgewater possibly being healthy. By the way, the other thing, too, is we have to keep in mind is there's still the possibility that if Teddy Bridgewater looks really good during the offseason in the camp, and it's becoming clear that maybe he should be the starting quarterback, that the Jets and they're whoever let's say the rookie, they have their rookie quarterback, and let's say their rookie quarterback is starting to look pretty decent. I wouldn't be shocked if Josh McCown were trade bait. Again, that would all depend, of course, if there was a team out there that had some sort of a situation, maybe their quarterback goes down during camp and they need to bring a guy in after a season like McCown had. So I don't see that happening, but let's just keep in mind that is another option. I don't know what the Jets would get out of that except just releasing some cap space, because there's no way that I could see them trading Teddy Bridgewater. The only way I could see them trading Teddy Bridgewater is if Josh McCown, for some reason, would win the job out of camp, and then you can go ahead and trade Bridgewater. But again, as I said last week on the show, I'm going to be shocked if Teddy Bridgewater is not the starting quarterback for us, because the only thing that could stop him from being the starting quarterback is ineptitude by the coaching staff by not giving him the job, or him just looking completely awful in the preseason. He's clearly a better guy, a better player right now at this stage of his career, as long as he's healthy, than Josh McCown.
Personally, I would keep McCown around because a couple of reasons. One, veteran presence, even a bit more than Bridgewater, who missed a lot of time because of his injury, and a guy who knows the Jets, knows the system, knows playing in the NFL, a guy who can be a really good mentor, potentially is going to be a coach down the road, and can help ease the rookie's acclimation to the NFL. Secondly, it also allows you not to throw him to the wolves, depending on what you think, how healthy Bridgewater is, which you're probably not going to get a true sense until really start going through mini camps and during the summer. So if they're going to make a move like that, I think it would occur later in the year.
Oh yeah, but it wouldn't happen until the preseason.
Now before the draft.
No, it's not. It wouldn't happen until the preseason. That wouldn't happen until preseason game number 4. You'd have to make sure Bridgewater's playing well in the preseason. You've gone through games. He's clearly the guy. And then you can go ahead and trade McCown if you're going to get something for him. Because I agree, I wouldn't trade Josh McCown just to trade him for a 7th-round draft pick. You might as well keep him as a backup and a mentor. And it'd be worth the $10 million to mentor your young quarterback. But, hey, if team's desperate, Bridgewater's your guy, and somebody's willing to offer a 5th-round draft pick for him or a 4th-round draft pick for him, then by all means, go ahead and get it done. And I'm sure McCown would be happy with it. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't want to be a backup if he knows the team wants to trade for him and make him a starter. So, well, I just wanted to throw that out there. We need to keep in mind that is still a possibility down the road because, there's no way I envision Teddy Bridgewater not starting on opening day. If that happens, then his career's over. Let's just put it that way. His career's over, or the coaching staff is moronic for putting Josh McCown into the starting lineup on opening day. As far as the other moves, the Mo Claiborne move was huge. So we were waiting for that. We were wondering about Ty Matthew or Mo Claiborne. The Jets get Mo Claiborne. They don't have to spend a whole lot of money in doing it. It's another nice deal for Maccagnan. So, boy, that secondary in just a couple of years now all of a sudden is the strength of their team. As long as these guys continue to progress and gel, they've got a good DB coach. So you put Claiborne with Trumaine Johnson, you put Screen in the slot, you've got Adams and May at safety, and you've got something going on there. And as I mentioned last week, when you have a good secondary, that offsets sometimes your inability to get to the pass rusher. So huge week last week for the Jets to bring in both Trumaine Johnson and bring back Mo Claiborne.
Yeah, I think we both talked about that a lot. I mean, a couple of pieces that I also wanted to see is when Tyrone Matthew and Honey Badger got released because he couldn't come to terms. That's the guy I would have loved to see them get, because I still think the defensive line is a major weakness. They need presence there. They did re-sign Mike Pennell, which is a good guy to have as a backup, and some depth along the line. They obviously are bringing in the outside linebacker associated as well that they just signed in terms of the 2-year deal from Kansas City. That's another guy that they added to the mix as potentially an outside pass rusher. But Matthew would have given them so many other dimensions because of what he could do. And to see him go to the Texans for 1 year and I'll say, quote unquote, just $7 million, which is kind of what Claiborne got, really makes me wish that they had gotten a chance to get that done. But it's clear that, in my opinion, J.J. Watt did a really good recruiting job on Matthew to bring him to the Texans, because can you imagine what the Jets secondary would have looked like with May, Adams, Claiborne, Trumaine Johnson, and Matthew patrolling the back end? You really could have gotten away with a average or below average line. They also wanted Barkevius Mingo, who they missed out on. That would have been another guy that would have been a nice addition to them in terms of their defensive line or outside linebacker help. And then the guy who really seemed to be the guy that they wanted to get was Daquan Jones, and he re-upped for a 3-year deal, and that would have been another guy who I would have really loved to have gotten because of the fact of what he would have done for the defensive line in terms of lengthening the line, in terms of the number of players that were out there, in terms of the ability for him to play both inside and outside, his ability to potentially pass rush. The deal he got wasn't huge. I mean, he re-signed 3 years, 21 mil, 8 mil, 8 mil, 18, 14 million guaranteed. The Jets clearly had the cap room to be able to get that. And then Mingo only got a 2-year, $6.8 million deal with $3.2 million guaranteed. So to me, those would have been two nice defensive guys to get. And then one interesting bit of news that just came out as we're chatting here is Terrelle Pryor is going to be with the Jets. And, my only concern is, and we've talked a little bit about this, is about having good character on this team and the issues that happen in the off season. And you can have your own view in terms of whether or not it's an indication on what's a priority, and the lack of character at times just in the room after cleaning up the mess that was the locker room 2 years ago. So one concern about me with Terrelle Pryor is just his inability to show maturity at all times, both on and off the field. And you added in with some of the other guys that they added, even the linebacker they just brought in from Kansas City, he's had his own issues. So I'm all for bringing in talent, but I also want to make sure we bring in the talent that's a better fit.
Well, I mean, when it happens, then we'll talk about it. But I agree. I mean, they still have Robbie Anderson, so that's already a problem. As we've said, I mean, look, if they want to for me, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather have Pryor than Anderson, because at least Pryor has had more maturity issues that have all been in the locker room, and you can grow up. Robbie Anderson has been all on the outside, and that's something that far disturbs me more. When you have no respect for the law, no respect for people, and you're immature. So Robbie Anderson needs to go. But Terrelle Pryor, if he was brought in and Robbie Anderson was let go, all right, let's see how he acts. Maybe the locker room, because of what it is, maybe he'll fit in here. I'd give him a shot and see how it goes. I agree with you. It wouldn't be my first choice. I'm sure if they brought him in, they wouldn't have to spend a whole lot of money for him. And he's a heck of a talent. But again, we'll talk about that if and when that deal becomes official. As far as Pierre Louis, that's just a body. That's just a linebacker. I think that's just a guy that'll help out with depth, which I'm okay with. I think the Jets can use some more depth. They lost Stanford, so basically Pierre Louis replaces Stanford. That's all that is. As far as, again, let's remember the defensive line with this team, based on Todd Bowles, is not where you're gonna get your pressure from. That's why we've been trying really hard to figure out, is there any way that they can change to a 4-3? He's not changing to a 4-3. So with his 3-4 line, that's why Sheldon Richardson was easier for him to go. That's why Wilkerson, it was easier for him to go. You don't need to have more than one superstar in the defensive line when you're running a 3-4. Jets have that, Leonard Williams. So Mike Pennell is a solid player. I got no problem with that. McClendon had a good season last season. Daquan Jones is probably just a little bit more than they wanted to spend on another guy. Look, the kid Cooper played well last year. So I think that maybe you bring in one more guy in the defensive line. Maybe you bring Ely back, and you're okay. I think you can win with that. You just definitely still have to find a pass rusher in your 3-4 defense. That's what they don't have. That's the missing ingredient that they're not going to get apparently this year unless they make a trade with Denver. I know they gave him a second-round tender for Shaquille Barrett. Jets don't have a second-round pick. But you can always call them up, work out a deal. Maybe you give them a fourth. Just because they have a second-round tender doesn't mean they won't accept a fourth. So I'm very surprised more teams haven't already talked to Denver about Shaquille Barrett. I don't know what everybody's waiting for. I mean, it's just these guys don't grow on trees. So that's still something that's out there. By the way, speaking of defensive linemen, I mean, Jonathan Hankins is now available. So I was kind of surprised to see the Colts let Jonathan Hankins go unless they're going to sign Ndamukong Suh. So Hankins had a fine season last year. He's a good player. He's a guy that fits perfectly along the defensive line. And then on the offensive line, we're still waiting for center. I mean, that is a big spot. We know Wesley Johnson won't be starting. So who's it going to be? I mean, Mike Pouncey's available now, but anybody that says he loves the Dolphins and he's always a Dolphin doesn't need to be on the Jets. And I don't really know if there's any other centers out there. So Long probably becomes the center now. And then you go, okay, well, do you bring in Mewert? I mean, is that a guy that you can bring in and add depth along to the offensive line? He's a guard. Okay, I wouldn't mind that. Or do you just go to the draft and take another guard somewhere in the middle rounds? Or of course, do you revolt the entire Jet fan base by drafting Nelson out of Notre Dame?
Well, I mean, the thing is, so again, this is part of the downstream impact associated, or domino, components associated with the move that they made, right? I don't disagree with the move. So that let me just say that. But what it does do is, if you think, it does impact your ability to make certain trades or certain ability to get certain players associated with the guys that you want to get in the second round, right? So, that second round pick could have been used for one of the other needs that they do have associated with this team. And now by removing that second round pick, now you have to be a bit more creative and hit on guys in the third round. And you can't hit on third round players, because I do think that there is going to be enough depth out there that you can fill holes. The thing is, you'd like to do is try to fill a few more of them.
But you had to make the move
before you go in.
But you had to make the move, though. But you had to make it. I mean, that's why even being okay.
I agree. Which is why you think about some of the other players that they quote unquote might have.
Yeah, it would have been nice. Sure, it would have been nice.
There's clearly that impact associated with it. So that's all I'm kind of saying.
Oh yeah, I'm very unhappy that we don't have three additional, especially 2 second-round picks this year. Would have been nice, and to get a good quarterback, but unfortunately, the Bills are going to try to trade out. We don't know about Denver. We can't. It was great to see Mike McCagnon be proactive and not just sit there and let everybody else take all 4 quarterbacks before we can get one. So it is what it is, and you're right. But that's the part of the business. Let's also keep in mind that it's not that he doesn't have more ammunition. Who says that he can't figure out another way with some more trades to occupy, moving up from the third round to the second round? We don't know that. Maybe he will. That's still something that if he wants a guy and he's got to move up a little bit in the second round to get him, he still has that first round next year if he wants to do something. So anything is possible. I'm okay with it. I think he's done a really good job at this point. I think we look at it, and I don't know. I mean, is there really anything at this? I mean, the Ijalana move was probably the only move that I started scratching my head for. Other than that, I mean, is there really anything that's happened so far this offseason that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to us? I mean, it's been going really well.
I think we're all happy so far. I mean, I think if you're going to grade him, I think it's probably a B or a B plus in terms of the moves that he's made. I mean, Spencer Long, we both wanted Jensen, but seeing what Jensen signed for, we can kind of understand why they didn't go that route.
And by the way, Ty Matthew got a lot of money too. So that's
$7 million is $7 million for what he could do is not an overpayment in my opinion.
No, it wasn't $7 million. It was over whatever. That's a $40 million deal. That's a lot of money, for a fifth defensive back. So.
Well, he can do so much. He becomes your jack of all trades. You can plug him in as a linebacker. You can plug him as a defensive back. He can also be a special teamer for you in terms of maybe returning punts periodically if you want to go that route. So they would have gotten very creative, and Bowles is extremely, well versed in terms of what Honey Badger could have done. So
sure, it would have been nice.
I'm not saying, that it was a major whiff, and I'm sure they were in the mix to get him. It just would have been nice if you think about everything else they've done on this team. If you add him to the mix,
that would have been a home run.
That would have been a huge win in terms of you look at your back end of your secondary now, because you could have gone, 3-2. You could have gone, 4-2-6. You could have gone 3-3-5. You could have used them all over the place.
Yeah, I definitely believe that they could use another player somewhere in the defensive backfield, the back seven that can cover. I do agree with that. Maybe that's still something that they could look at. They still have a lot of money to spend. They do have to think about Leonard Williams and what kind of contract eventually they got to get him, because they got to lock him up soon. So that's something that they have to, talk about with their money. We'll find out about the tight end position as well. Is Leggett? I mean, there's just no way I could see the Jets saying, okay, it's Leggett and Tomlinson. It's just not going to happen. So what do? Is it free agency? And if it's free agency, do they give Eric Ebron a shot? I've never been the biggest Eric Ebron fan, but that's only because of the fact that to me, when you get drafted in the top 20 of the NFL draft, you better produce. You better be a Hall of Fame caliber tight end. And he's been anything but. He's just been okay. But compared to what the Jets have had at tight end over the years, and that even includes Jenkins last year, he'd be an upgrade. And we didn't have to give up a first-round pick for him. So if we can get a guy like Eric Ebron in town, that would be nice. I don't know if they would do that with Leggett. Maybe they say, well, we really like Leggett. We don't want to spend money on Ebron, so let's go into this deep draft class and use up, a third or a fourth-round pick on one of these really good tight ends. So that's why this whole free agency thing, there's still a long way to go before we kind of see which holes still are filled and then which ones are left over for the draft. So still some time to go there. And by the way, Pernell McPhee is now available. He's got some outside linebacker experience if he can stay healthy. So that's somebody else to keep in mind. And then the Jets also brought in their kicker, Cairo Santos, which I'm okay for. I mean, I was a Santos fan when he came out of school. Big leg, strong leg. Had a couple of decent seasons in Kansas City. He's been, typical young, erratic kicker from year to year. But again, he's got a strong leg, and he just needs to find a home. And so I think I'm okay with that. I think that's a good young kicker to bring on board that has pro experience already, so the stage won't be big. And once he finds a home, he could be a really good kicker for you down the road.
I think we're hoping that's the case, and clearly it didn't necessarily pan out for him in Kansas City directly. So if you look at the guys that they lost, right, the Catanzaro deal, pretty decent price, but I do think it was something they could have met or beaten if they wanted to. Secondly, in terms of the ASJ piece, we talked a lot about it, and if you think about what he ended up going for compared to the offer, to me, that was a deal that if they wanted to meet, they could have met, and maybe quite possibly should have met.
That's a running theme, though. That's a running theme the entire offseason, isn't it? If they would have just spent a couple more million, I mean, it all adds up. Yeah.
Again, Leggett, we don't know anything about because of the injury. So we got no sense. I mean, Tomlinson turned out to be a pretty good blocking tight end and made some occasional catches that I think we were all shocked at.
Because he was wide open. Yes.
Yep. Wide open because nobody paid attention to him. But I do think that, you need to go in with clearly a lot more depth than what you have right now on this roster. And Severian Jenkins is a guy who resurrected his career. We both talked a lot about last year that he faded down the stretch. And part of that may have been that was really his first full year in a really long while. And that may have been a component associated with the fade. So I don't necessarily take him to task for that fade necessarily, but I will admit to you that there were some concerning signs in terms of the fade and him not necessarily producing late. But they are going to go out and get a tight end. Now, part of it, if they do bring in Ebron, and he clearly has to be viewed as a failed first rounder right now, I think part of that's going to depend on how much you're paying him, because if you pay him in anywhere close to a range that ASJ would have gotten, then you look kind of silly. Part of it you have to factor in, though, is that Jenkins did go to a state that has no state income tax. So there's probably a good close to $900,000, maybe $1 million in terms of, salary that's ending up in his pocket, as opposed to going to taxes that has to be factored into the overall equation of the offer.
Yeah, I think I think the offer was good enough. He didn't give the Jets any sort of discount. And I think it was one of those things. It's just a business. That's all it is. I do believe the Jets will more than likely use up that tight end situation in the draft. That's just where that's the thing we have to realize as well as fans, which we want to win fast, but there's not their approach now. Their approach is to rebuild, do it the slow way, do it the right way. If guys like Jenkins, the guys like the Jensens and the Jenkins and so forth that have 1 year, 1 year of production, that's probably not a wise thing for this franchise to do, is to take a chance with those types of players when you're not trying to win a championship next year, when you're trying to build for the future. So instead, save $2 million there, save $2 million there, save $5 million there, save $3 million there. And all of a sudden, you have a lot more money. You can spend it on the players that you already have on your team. That again, the Leonard Williams players. Or having money at this point in time is a good thing. They're going to be. We just talked about Hankins just got cut. McPhee got cut. There are other guys that will probably be cut in the next few weeks, and the Jets are going to sit there with a lot of money. They still have like the top 2 or 3. As far as the cap, any sort of player they want to get right now, they can afford. So I like the approach. I think they've done it the right way, and it's not over yet. So we still have a good, few weeks to go, more than likely, before it's all said and done. And then we can pretty much say, well, that's it. The free agent market is dried up, and now it's on to the draft. But I don't think we've done the last of these free agency shows. I would suspect we might be doing another show later this week.
It's quite possible. I mean, I think they're going to make some pieces, as you talked about, around the edges to improve the roster in terms of the depth that's needed associated. So it may not be, quote unquote, sexy moves, but it could very well be moves that shore up some areas of potential weakness to try to make them a stronger team overall rather than the big splash. Maybe adding another depth offensive lineman. Although they did bring back Ajana, so that's one guy that they brought back to provide some depth. Maybe getting another defensive lineman or a linebacker, which is another area need. Maybe, as you talked about, Ebron is signed maybe to a 1-year deal with some incentives in there to kind of minimize your downside risk associated with a transaction like that. So it wouldn't shock me if you start seeing smaller moves, and clearly they made the big move. So from now until the draft, the big thing is going to be seeing what do Cleveland and the Giants do at 1 and 2, both in terms of staying at those spots or trading out, and then clearly at the draft, if they do stay in those spots, what they take. And then who, quote unquote, falls to the Jets, and how does that person rate in terms of their overall list that they've put together? Because clearly they've identified 3 players that they view probably as head and shoulders above others. And whether or not one of those 3 fall to them, which you would think it would, depending on how they've done their rating scale. It should be interesting if, let's say, 2 of the 3 fall, how you go about taking one of those 2 if they are both rated fairly closely to one another.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, as we promised it was going to be, and we promised you as of last August that this was going to be the time to look forward to and not worry about wins and losses during the season, and concentrate on this point and the rebuilding. And so far, most of it is working out. There's still some things I'm sure we'd both like. Some other changes that we'd like to see happen, and we've got the draft. We still don't know who that pick is going to be, but look, as we've said before, whichever name comes out of the commissioner's mouth, that quarterback, or to tell you the truth, now that they're at number 3, whosever name comes out, period, we're going to be okay with. It's, even if we don't believe that Josh Rosen's the right fit, or if Josh Allen is not the most consistent, or Sam Darnold is a turnover machine, that's okay. If because they're talented, And once you bring those guys in, then you've got an identity. Then you start backing those kids, and it's good to know that as of last week, which was a little bit different, now just a couple of days later, the Jets will, as long as that player's a quarterback, they will be getting their quarterback of the future in a little bit more than a month, and that's a nice thing to be hopeful about. Now you just got to hope that they get lucky with the right pick. So.
That's the key. Luck is the key here. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of see what happens.
And I still think Mayfield, like I said, I still think Mayfield's a possibility. I really do. I mean, I still think they could go after him, because if you think about it, I mean, you could have all these people say what they want about all these other quarterbacks, and this is way it's because they're going to say that. We said it. This is what we said months ago. We knew what the analysts were going to say about him. So hearing more people talk about the other three guys and, they're this three guys and this three, what do you think? I mean, of course they're going to talk about those guys. Oh, there's no way the Jets are moving up to 3 to get Mayfield. Well, of course they're going to say that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. So I still think there's a shot that they could get him, and we'll find out. But if it's not him, then, hey, best of luck to whoever else it is. All right.
We've talked a lot about it. I mean, I think the viewpoint we had originally was based upon the presumption that they may stay in the position where they're at. Now that that's changed, your mindset in terms of philosophy, in terms of who you want, needs to be altered associated with that. So, I personally still like Mayfield, but I can understand going for one of the other 3 quarterbacks, depending on which one slips. Each of them have their pros and cons, but my understanding is, from all that I've read and all that I've listened to, is McCagnon and their cross-checkers and all their scouts did a pretty yeoman's work in terms of following all these quarterbacks all year long, being at if not all, a substantial number of their games, being at their pro workouts, being at the combine. So I don't think if they do end up making the wrong decision, and I think we all hope that, without any reservation, that that's clearly not the case. But I do think that if the wrong decision is made, it's not for lack of effort and review and evaluation associated with it, because despite all of the evaluation you may do, as we've seen already, that drafting in the NFL or mostly any sport is a crapshoot, and you hope to get lucky. And this is a case where, seeing the issues that they've had with the high picks in many of the years where they've had a high pick and made that selection, I think we all hope that this is one of those years where they get it right, especially because of the material impact on this team for the next 5+ years potentially.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody is going to, because all 4 of these quarterbacks have flaws, no matter, especially, and it's the New York market, you can be rest assured that they're going to pick out those flaws. So if it's Mayfield, they're going to talk about his character, and who knows, maybe his size. If it's Darnold, they're going to talk about his turnovers. If it's Rosen, it's his concussion. If it's Allen, it's his inaccuracy. So there's going to be the criticism, and so that's the other reason to take into account, which is why I don't believe it's going to be Rosen, because they have to know how important it is to get the right guy that fits with this organization in this town and in this media. And I don't see that being Rosen. And if Darnold goes to Cleveland, then it's Allen or Mayfield. And I think those are also the 2 guys out of the 4 that I feel can, and maybe even Darnold, I throw him in there. But to me, I think Rosen is 4 out of 4 of guys that I think can handle being a New York Jet quarterback. I would put Darnold 3, I would put Allen 2, and Mayfield 1. So if it's Allen if it's Mayfield or Allen, which is really would be my preference based on just being a Jet fan and knowing how they're going to have to interact with the New York media, I'm going to be okay with that, because I feel like one of those 2 guys will be able to handle it, and will have the most chance for success.
From your mouth to God's ears, sir. I'm hoping they're right.
I hope so. By the way, I was taking a look at Cam Newton's. I was doing getting ready for my Carolina report. And I noticed, and this is something I never knew before, I noticed that Cam Newton's career completion percentage is under 60%. And this is a guy that nearly won the Super Bowl. So if you're looking at a guy like Josh Allen, and you're talking about what he can bring to the table, and, does he have to have a completion percentage over 60% to succeed at the next level? That's not always true. So, but you have to bring the other intangibles, which Allen does. So let's keep that in mind. See, at least Allen brings the other intangibles. Like Newton, Allen can move in the pocket. Allen's a big guy. So that's the reason why Allen is intriguing in that sense. So even though he may never have a 65% completion percentage in the NFL, he's going to bring the other intangibles that you're going to need to be a successful quarterback on the next level. So I thought that was interesting when I saw that, because it's very rare for a premier quarterback in the NFL to have a completion percentage over his career under 60%.
But he does so many other things to help make him a winner. So you can live with the impact in terms of the lack of the completion percentage, and those are criticisms that he still gets to this day. Yet, despite all that, because of everything that he does, and he's clearly not been a consistent quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but he is an NFL MVP at one point in time, and he did lead his team to the Super Bowl. So if we can get that out of the next guy we get, then hopefully actually goes the next step and wins the Super Bowl. I think I can live with that.
Yeah, and they run the ball well, and so if you can run the ball well, which I know the Jets need to, and you can have a really good defense like a team like the Panthers have, and that's what the Jets are building, then all of that makes it a lot easier for a guy like a Josh Allen for you to be successful. And that's something to keep in mind, and something that we'll talk a lot more of if he becomes the Jets quarterback. So, okay, that'll wrap it up, Jan. I appreciate it. We will talk to you again as soon as there's more big news for the New York Jets between now and the draft.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Jan. That's Jan Levine, AirJan23. You can follow him on Twitter. You can follow us at PrimeSN. We have our baseball show coming up in 10 minutes if you're listening live. And then we'll have more college basketball shows. The Sweet 16 preview is Wednesday. Our golf show for the match play event is tomorrow. We will also, what else we got this week? We have the usual shows. We've got the Louisiana Derby, the Kentucky Derby prep race starts this Saturday. We have our draft show, of course, with Dan Shanka this week, and much more here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network and over at PrimeSportsNetwork.com. So, for Jan Levine, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to Jets Uncovered on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. We'll see you next time. And don't forget the mock draft contest at ourlads.com. Cash prize goes to the winner of that contest. So go check that out. Also, check out the subscription area on the ourlads.com website to get your draft guide. You want to get a head start on that. Make sure you have enough money saved up over the next few weeks so you get that on time when it's in your mailbox, like the first week, 10 days of April, okay? So we'll see you next time on Jets Uncovered, and later on this week with Dan Shanka on Our Lads Guide to the 2018 NFL Draft.